Welcome to Delenta Activate, the podcast that brings you insights and stories from executive coaches and changemakers in the leadership space. I'm your host, Dr. Naeema Pasha from Delenta, and I'm excited to share with you the latest trends, best practices, and innovations in coaching and leadership development. In this podcast, you'll hear from experts who successfully coach leaders and teams to achieve their goals and overcome challenges and transform their organizations. Whether you're a coach, a leader, or someone who wants to grow personally and professionally, this is the podcast for you. So tune in, get inspired, and activate your potential with Delenta Activate. Hello, I'm really pleased to be here. This is Naeema here from Delenta Activate, and I've got an amazing guest on today's show, and I'm really pleased to introduce to you RaQuel Hopkins. Hi, RaQuel. How are you?
Hello, Dr. Naeema. I am well. How are you?
Oh, good. We've just been talking about the weather, which is always good because you're over in Houston at the moment. Just tell me how the weather is there for you.
It's raining. It's raining. You wake up and you just never know what you're gonna get.
Well, that could be what we talk about in terms of this podcast today. We wake up, you just don't know what you're gonna get, how you're going to manage, and how you're going to move forward. It's raining here in the UK as well. Where I am. So let's go on. And I'm so happy you're here. And if I can just do a little bit of an introduction to you, because reading about you, looking at the things you write about and you talk about, I was just really completely blown away with what you're doing. You're an amazing person. You've got a background in HR. You also are a founder, which we're really going to dig into a lot more today, as success is complicated. You've got an MBA, you've got your master's in clinical and mental health counseling, and because of the work that you do across the world with tech firms and things, you've got this expertise, as you discussed in what you're talking about, between this crossroads of business, coaching, mental wellness. And I think that's such an important thing that we all need to hear more about. So thank you so much for coming on to Delenta Activate. And we're going to talk about a lot of the things I hope we'll both find interesting. And importantly, people listening in, watching in will find interesting as well. I wonder if we could start off with, tell me why you started Success is Complicated.
Oh. So I started Success is Complicated, I believe, back in 2019. And I would tell you that the meaning behind it has evolved, but it started from my own personal story. I'll never forget it. I was pacing back and forth in my VP office, my window view, and I was contemplating on resigning from that job and kind of figuring out like what was next for myself. And there's a piece of me that wanted to stay where I was because there still were a lot of benefits. And I was like, oh man, this is complicated. And I was like, you know what? Success is complicated. And that's where it came from. And it was this idea that oftentimes we feel like once we've arrived, like that's the ending. And I thought that would be the same for me. I had all of the things, especially all of the things that society would say that would deem you as successful. However, I had all of those things, but yet I still feel unfulfilled and like something was missing. And that's where it came from. And as I continue like my education and my journey, you realize that like nothing about our journey is linear. Like it is literally like up, down, twists, turns, curves. And that's what Success is Complicated is about. It's honoring the uniqueness of us as individuals, as humans, and recognizing that life is going to continue to throw those curveballs in order to get us to exercise becoming whatever the best version of ourselves look like.
That's very interesting, RaQuel. But you think, because we all have that experience of thinking, you and I were joking about this virtual background that I have behind me of this sofa and imagining that one day I'll be having such an amazing sofa with this beautiful loft apartment. But you're suggesting if that does happen, I get the sofa, I get the loft apartment. What happens then? Am I not going to feel the kind of fulfillment that I think I'm going to really imagine that I'll get with this life that I've projected for myself?
It depends on the person, right? Because a lot of what we're experiencing is based off of how we think, right? But when you start to understand human and adult development, we realize that I always tell people, because I had wrote a book when I was going through this phase, and I was like, what they don't tell you about success. And I was so upset about success. And then as I got into like human and adult development, what you learn is like learning to be autonomous, feeling that sense of achievement, that sense of pride in terms of your work or the external things that we refer to. It matters. Those are the things. You do not know that you lack fulfillment without necessarily having achieved. So for me, it's about normalizing that. The way to start is you build that sense of confidence, you build that sense of industry so that you don't feel inferior, you don't get caught up in comparing yourselves. And then eventually we start to transition into other phases and stages in life. And I think that if we spoke about it from that, it wouldn't necessarily be a problem. It's almost like I expect this thing to present itself to me at some point in my life if I've done these things.
That's interesting, because there's the research on happiness that you probably have come across about that we get it's an evolutionary part of our brain. I don't know whether you've heard of it, but interesting to hear your thoughts. That you're on this, I think it's called the hedonistic treadmill that people talk about. You're on this treadmill, you're trying to get to the next stage, you get to that stage, and then you get there and you get the bit that you're looking after, then you think, oh, I've got used to that for a short while, I'm happy with it, and then it doesn't bring fulfillment. Then you're looking for the next stage and then the next thing. I don't know what your thoughts are that. It feels like a bit tiring that we just have to keep looking for the next thing for the next thing.
And this is why I like to rely on human and adult development, because when you start to understand what does it mean to develop an adult, if I had to summarize it in a few words, I would say developing an adult is working on supporting or guiding an adult in terms of developing their own internal compass. When you start to work with individuals from that perspective and they develop their own internal compass, it's less about looking for the next thing, because people start to trust themselves. People start to feel that sense of autonomy in terms of having that free will and choice. And I think that what we have done is a lot of what is normal for us to experience as humans, we've created it or turned it into problems. And that creates another layer of pressure versus normalizing the human experiences. And when I say human experiences, phases of life, stages of life, right? There are unique challenges and opportunities that are going to present themselves depending on the phase or stage of your life, or depending on what transitions you're going through. And I think that when you start to speak about it from that perspective, it allows people to kind of like breathe. Okay, this is not normal. Other people are experiencing it, whether they talk about it or not. The main focus is truly about turning inward, because that is what adulting is about. It kind of shifts, right? You think about children, and children, trust starts with learning to trust your caregivers, right? And then as you become an adult, it's about becoming self-reliant. You're becoming independent. The one person that you need to learn to trust is yourself. And I think that what ends up happening is from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, it's just like, there's like no distinction. You just kind of jump into adulthood. And then most of us are like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And then our meaning making, or at least from what I'm seeing today, is usually rooted in childhood, because people don't know how to make that connection from childhood to adulthood, or we just feel like lost. And wow. I'm really passionate about this, so I can keep on going. So I
don't. Wow, I want you to keep on going, because I think this is really interesting. I'm learning. Tell me a bit more about that leap, because there's two things I wanted to ask you actually about the normalizing, the kind of things perhaps you said we need to normalize certain things a bit more. What kind of things would you say to a client like this is normal for you to experience? I wanted to ask about that. And the other thing, which I'll let you know now, then we can come back to it, but a little bit more about this leap from you said like childhood, and maybe this happens more in Western cultures because of how schooling happens, and then going to work, and maybe your childhood, whoa, I'm an adult, and then we haven't developed these particular quality. I wanted to know a bit more about that. It's really fascinating. So the first one is
if I was coming to you or reading about your work, what are these normal things should we be experiencing, or expect to experience, and not react so much to that they think, oh, well, this has happened. Why is this bad?
So we could break it up in three categories, right? We can look at young adulthood, middle adulthood, and then late adulthood. Now, I always like to preference that development is not linear, no different from children. Like it bounces all over the place. But if we look at like young adulthood, right, it's the time where you are trying to develop a sense of self. And when you are trying to develop a sense of self, there would be feelings of inadequacy, feelings of not feeling good enough. There would be times where you're going to be comparing your journey with other people's journey. And then when you get into like middle adulthood, right? And that, depending on your experiences and exposure, it could be different for everybody. But middle adulthood is usually when we talk about like the midlife crisis. Like, oh my gosh, like I'm this age, I haven't done this, I haven't accomplished this, I haven't gotten married, I haven't had kids, whatever it may be, right? You start questioning like, what do I truly want for myself? And I find that when you understand human and adult development, it allows you to work with young adults a little bit more, because that's a key developmental area. The same way you would do with children. Somehow we haven't necessarily converted that into adulthood. So, and then when you get into late adulthood, I like to use one of my favorite theories is Erickson, psychosocial development, but it gets into like generativity versus stagnation, right? Like, how am I giving back? And then this integrity versus despair. At some point, we're all going to go back and look on our life. Is there a sense of satisfaction or is there a sense of regret? So it's less about, we're all going to like face death one day, right? We know that. But when you start to understand human development from that standpoint, no matter who you are, at some point, no matter what your age is, you will start to question your integrity versus that despair. Is there a sense of contentment? And you can have contentment at 20, you can have contentment at 30, you can have contentment at 40. It's all in how you start to exercise your free will. And I think it's about application too, because when I talk about free will, it's the existentialism. I know when I was working to become a therapist and I found out about the 4 demands that we all confront as humans: death, isolation, meaninglessness, and freedom. I was like, oh, wow, mind blowing. Like, and it gave me more context in terms of how I could actually maneuver life and feeling less so like, oh, adulting has no framework.
This is incredible. Thank you. There's something you talked about, if I can go into a little bit more of that, because I was just looking at the things you post, which really kind of like, wow, this is quite incredible. And you reposted somebody who talked about, they said, at some point, you're going to have to take responsibility for the work you didn't do, not to be in the place you expected to be. And you talked about that in the context of the world we're in now, because of the fast-paced work and the nature of the pressures upon us. I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit more about, that kind of statement about at some point we're going to have to take responsibility for the work we didn't do to get to the place we're expected to be.
Yeah, that's Miley Teal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So harsh reality, a harsh truth for many of us, but with freedom comes responsibility, and with responsibility comes consequences, good or bad, right? The piece that's missing there is a lot of the times we don't know what the work is that we're needing to do. So what ends up happening is we focus on like more skills, for example. And I love to talk about more skills because adults don't necessarily need more skills. They don't need to be inundated with more information, which is why I say we need to start looking at humans from a developmental standpoint. If we look at humans from a developmental standpoint, it doesn't mean that we're going to erase the challenges that are going to present themselves, but people feel more equipped. They feel more resilient in order to navigate through change, complexity, and uncertainty. And that's what adult development is about, is being able to support people so that they are okay and they don't fall victim to not necessarily doing the work, because doing the work isn't having 5 degrees. And I make jokes about it because when I was very lost, that's how I've ended up with 2 masters, right? I thought like doing the work was rooted in that, but it really had nothing to do with that. It was learning to develop that own internal compass, understanding that with freedom comes the weight of responsibility, the weight of consequences. And once I started to be able to, I heard this quote one time, and it was, information isn't always knowledge, and knowledge isn't always wisdom. And I was like, oh, wow, that is so profound. And there's so much information out there. And if you don't know how to bring it all together and apply it in a way that is beneficial to people, I think that you continue to see a lot of the trends that we're seeing today. So I've taken like all of my knowledge from an HR standpoint, from an executive and mental health background, and kind of pulled it all together, put it in these 5 pillars for mastering adulting. And I focus on adulting rather than, I remember when I got into coaching, Dr. Naeema, and they were like, you need a niche. And I was like, oh, high achievers, because I definitely relate with that. And then I was like, oh, woman. And it just never felt right for me. And you think about adulting, I think that adulting encompasses all of your life roles. Now, when we start to talk about integrating like work and personal life, if you look at the overarching umbrella, people that have the challenges that you and I have, we don't have it because you're a mom, your wife, or you're in a leadership position. You have it because you're an adult. And part of being an adult is life says, hey, Dr. Naeema, I'm going to offer you an opportunity to grow. But in order for you to grow, here's responsibility and responsibility and responsibility. But oftentimes we see responsibility as a burden.
Why do we do that? RaQuel, tell me a bit more about this. Why do we see responsibility as a burden? And is this part of a modern experience, do you think, because of work?
Absolutely. I think it's work and personal, right? Because you think about when people are transitioning into leadership roles, it's like now you're responsible for other people. You're responsible for how you show up. You're responsible for this. You're responsible for managing their lives. And what ends up happening is the way that we communicate, language matters. And when I say that language matters, I think that whether you're looking at it from a personal standpoint, it's like, all right, when you turn 18 or once you finally get out into the real world, like it gets real, it already positions us to kind of like think the worst. Like you're not even thinking about how fulfilling it can be. And one of the things that I'm even seeing from a work standpoint is most people don't want to be in leadership because they don't want to be responsible for others, because it carries a burden. So it's a psychological thing. And when I say psychological, it has the ability to impact our overall emotional and mental well-being. So a lot of it is in my work, and with Success is Complicated, is challenging the way that we view adulting and the responsibilities, because children don't necessarily have the freedom that we have. You get freedom with evolving, with growing. And if we were to start to look at responsibility as an opportunity to learn new skills, it changes the narrative around like you are now responsible. You now have another demand placed on you.
How do we, the way we talk about developing, the way you talk about developing responsibility in order to access freedom, what joy is there in that process? Because if we're encouraging people to go through that process, to take on more responsibility, maybe take on leadership, maybe not necessarily a leadership role in an organization, but maybe leading by example, like, you're a woman wanting to make a move forward to show how women can progress, whatever, these kind of responsibilities that we might feel we need to take for freedom. How would we enable people to do that and feel joy in that process? Or should we feel joy?
I would say that it's possible to feel joy. Now, going back to your question, it's language, and that's a challenge, because the way that we speak about a lot of our challenges today is not necessarily in a way that would make people super happy. What ends up happening is it just becomes bearable, right? Like, I got to do it, have to make it happen. It's never like I get to or I choose to do this thing. And that's the difference. So it's really like a mind, it's a mindset, and you have to be able to challenge a person's belief and what they believe to be true about life. If I were to ask you just a simple question here, Dr. Naeema, like, what are your thoughts about adulting? Based off of what you tell me, it would help me or support me in figuring out how you actually enjoy or don't enjoy the whole experience of adulting. And it goes back to, we always talk about like, enjoy the journey, enjoy the journey.
Yeah, yeah.
Many of us enjoy the adulting journey. Like, I hear a lot of people say, oh, like, go back to your inner child and all
Yeah.
this. Like, you're not a child anymore. Like, that's just the truth. You're just not. Like, you too can experience adulting in the same manner that you would as a child. It may not look the same, but you too can do that.
And is this process of moving through accepting responsibility in order to have freedom, it feels a little bit about, to me, the word duty comes to mind. And then you talked about language. It feels like we do this because it's a duty to do this for ourselves, for the people around us, for society maybe. Duty feels quite heavy. Responsibility feels quite heavy. Can you just, you're nodding, tell me a bit more about how that, tell me a bit more about that.
So the way that I think about it, or when I'm working with my clients, you meet people where they are, right? Responsibility is an opportunity to grow. Everybody's not taking on responsibility. There are some people that are redefining their definitions to success, what it means to be a leader. So I think that responsibility, what is attached to responsibility, has nothing to do with learning, acquiring new skills, being able to develop. And I think that is the mindset shift. In order to achieve responsibility, it means that you have accomplished something from a previous state.
Right.
And then you go to something else. It means that you are exercising your sense of autonomy, your sense of free will. And to me, that is the biggest the biggest disconnect.
That really makes sense, and that really leads me because we haven't gone into the detail that I'd like to on your 5 pillars, because you talk about the 5 pillars for mastering adulting, and you said they're not just designed for external accolades, but this internal evolution. RaQuel, would love to know a bit more about that. I would be, being amazing to explore.
I'll tell you. So the 5 pillars, the first one is personal growth and identity. And the personal growth and identity is recognizing that we are always evolving and changing. You shouldn't have to wait until you're 30, 40, or 50 years old to say, oh my gosh, like, it's time to make a change. If you're always in tune and understanding that personal growth and identity is always evolving, it gives you the opportunity to create space to develop, to always develop that sense of self. The second one is emotional and mental well-being. And a lot of people think that emotional and mental well-being is, are you able to articulate how you feel? Are you able to regulate? And I will say a lot of it is centered around that. But if we're talking about this from an adulting standpoint, are you honest about what adulting is, or you feel you have no other choice but to bear the responsibility and continue to do what you have to do, that you feel like you're carrying this weight around? So emotional and mental well-being is being honest about the things that you also still feel like you have no choice. And I see this a lot of the times in leadership as a mom, like, well, I have to because I'm a leader. And all of the pillars are connected, right? Because that personal growth and identity kind of challenges you to define like all of your life roles. And then the third one is decision-making and critical thinking. And decision-making and critical thinking is huge. The best way to explain that is, a lot of us can get so stuck that we're not able to see other possibilities for ourselves. So are you asking the right questions for people to step outside of their bubble so that they can look at how they're currently making decisions? And one of the things that I like to use for decision-making and critical thinking is, in adult development, there's this psychologist named Robert Keegan, and he talks about our forms of mind in adulthood. He takes it from childhood into adulthood. And for me, when I first learned about it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so mind blowing. Like, again, another thing that I could relate to that could also challenge me to grow as an individual and as a professional. But it gives you something to kind of like a tangible framework to kind of run your decision making through. Like, is it coming from this form of mind? How is this supporting or serving me? So that's the third one. The fourth one is relationships and communications, right? How do I handle difficult conversations? How do I create that sense of community so that I don't fall victim to loneliness and or depression or any of those things? And then the fifth one is career development, right? We should always be thinking about our career development, because from a human development standpoint, the external achievements matter just as much as the internal achievements. And somehow we put more weight on the internal achievements versus being able to find the balance between the two. So it's really a holistic approach that allows you to look at your life, no matter what phase or stage you is, and it puts questions back in your face. Am I looking at my relationships and communication? Am I looking at how I make decisions today? Because things are changing. My identity has changed. Am I paying attention to the feelings that I feel like I necessarily have no control over? And truly exercising that sense of freedom that comes with being an adult. So it's very comprehensive.
It is comprehensive. And I think anyone going through that journey, which I've seen, when I'm reading about the work that you've done, success is complicated, as you said, on these stages. And if I want to ask you just a little bit more about the career one in particular, and I'm really interested in the external versus internal. How can we start? What would we need to do if you're, to start recognizing our internal accolades and achievements? What kind of things would I need to do, for example, to focus more on that? Because I am quite external focused. I am quite external focused as well.
There's nothing wrong with that. That is nothing wrong with that. I guess before I answer that question, I think that, so when you say that I'm very external focused, it's not a judgment there, right? It tells me that Dr. Naeema says that there's more that I feel like I can accomplish. Now, the balance from an internal standpoint is the external attached to my worth, how I feel about myself, how I see myself, because that is what creates the struggle. When you tell me that I'm still very externally focused, it just means that I still feel like that there's more that I have to do, more that I can truly be. I haven't necessarily reached the star of what I believe like the best version of myself is. And when we really talk about what mental health is, I think that that's incredible. Right. I think that it's incredible because we have to make the distinction between mental health versus mental illness. Your mental health is how you think, feel, and behave. Those things should always be changing. When you talk about like the new research that's around neuroplasticity, and at one point when they used to say that at some point adults, we stop growing, and now they're saying that we have the ability to make connections in our brains that they didn't know that was available at first, right? So to me, it's about you exercising that free will and really understanding that mental health is about optimization, right? And that optimization is still very subjective based off of the individual, but for me, that is what mental health is about, which is why I tell people oftentimes, like, if you tell me that you're protecting your peace and your mental health, you don't understand what mental health is, because if you're in a place of protection, it tells me that you're not stretching yourself in some areas. So going back to the internal piece, I still think it's about timing. It's phases. It's these different life stages. Like, do I feel like I have given enough to myself externally to where I'm really ready to give back in general, if that makes sense? Like, have I filled up my cup from an external achievement standpoint enough to feel like I'm ready to give back? And those were those other life phases and stages that I was mentioning to you.
That's really interesting. It's been really helpful to me, actually, just to even sort of weigh up where I am and how I start measuring my successes, where they've come from. And really good to think about this neuroplasticity as well, because sometimes we think, well, that was me set, but no, I can still maybe go on and do things and measure myself differently. And as I'm getting older, I am thinking differently about how I can measure success and the measure of, like you talked about, relationships and building those as part of the 5 pillars as well. What about you? How are you tell me about how you apply the 5 pillars to yourself, because it's as people working as coaching and therapists and advisors and so on, sometimes it's hard to hold the mirror up.
Yeah. Well, one, I would say I know my strengths. So for career, hence my education.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily struggle there, right? But it's being able to fight, because we're always gonna try to work on the things that we think we can fix. I allow life to present whatever it is that I need to grow and evolve. And I'll give you an example from an emotional standpoint, right? And I just had this reality maybe a couple weeks ago. I am very keen on independence. Like, my independence, it means everything to me. Now, I have not necessarily taken an opportunity to go back and redefine what it means to be independent. So maybe in my friendships, right? I don't mind picking up the phone and asking for help. Maybe in like building relationships from this standpoint, I don't mind asking for help. When it comes to like my home life, right? The dynamics between a woman and a man, and it has nothing to do with my husband. My husband is amazing. But that sense of independency gets in the way of relationships and communication, my emotional and my mental well-being, because I've put up a guard, because I am a feminist, I would say, in a lot of ways, even though I work with both men and women, but I don't necessarily try and fix, which is why the 5 pillars are there, right? Because it's not about going back and trying to figure out where do I need to grow or evolve. Life is going to tell you. I always tell people, when you start to feel like that sense of there's inner conflicts, will tell you that you're struggling with something. There's usually like a value of yours. And I would tell you that for me, it's like, I want to be more open. I want to be able to connect with my husband in that way. But you cannot do that if you're still holding on to independence and you value vulnerability. So at some point you have to choose. And that's what people always say, well, 2 things can coexist. Yeah, depending on where you are. But if you're being really, really honest with yourself in terms of what you want, do I want independence or do I want vulnerability, and recognizing that that totally looks different. So for me, it's, I'm not going around like treating myself as something to fix. I don't. I spent a lot of my life doing that, and I just wait for life to present the opportunities. I always tell people, life does not care about who you are. It doesn't care about you being a woman, a man, what your race is, your religion is. Like, life does not discriminate with its life lessons. And I live my life according to that.
Well, you do, and to hear you talk about it, because I was reading when your work around the journey to success is complicated. You say you walk this path. You say that on your website. You walk this path, and through that, you to share the insights and direction. And I, just in this conversation, I think it's been fascinating. I just want to say thank you so much, and anything that you can offer us as a kind of final kind of nugget of information. I know there's vast information you have, but something that you want to particularly think, yes, it'd be great to share that with Delenta Activate about adulthood and everything that you've talked about.
Yeah. I think the thing that comes to my mind, especially when you just talk about the brand Success is Complicated, is I actually heard a client say this week. He said, I had finally found my groove and things were getting good. If you think you have finally found your groove, life is asking you to evolve. Doesn't mean that you have to go out searching for what that is. But if you finally felt like, I got it right, life is saying, all right, time to evolve again.
That sounds great. Also quite painful, because I'm kind of like, I'm quite comfortable. I'm evolved. I'm on that sofa you see behind me. I don't want to go out and evolve any further. I kind of like daylight saving times are here. But yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. We need to keep going. Honestly, it's been, I've learned so much. And I'm just so impressed by everything that you do. Wishing you so much luck, and I think it's going to. Thank you very much for sharing everything that you have here. Thank you, RaQuel Hopkins. It's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. I started my coaching journey on this platform of Delenta, literally throwing spaghetti at the wall, and Delenta has been like a gift in my life in terms of supporting and serving my clients. So I'm happy that I get an opportunity to give back in this way to a company that has given a lot to me. So thank you so much, Dr. Naeema, for interviewing me and just being able to spend this time with you.
It's been wonderful. Have a wonderful time. Thank you so much.
Powered by Delenta, your all-in-one coaching platform.